Feeling connected and valued in the music classroom isn't just nice, it's essential for learning. Join us as we explore intentional ways to make every student feel welcome and empowered.
Welcome to Pass the Baton, Empowering Students in Music Education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives.
Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We are so glad that you're with us today. So, Kathryn, I know that I kind of lean on you to find elementary people, but this one was awesome.
Yeah, Matthew was. Yeah, I remember seeing him at a state conference and thinking like, yes, he is somebody we need to talk to. And it was really nice today to kind of geek out on general music.
Yeah. So. Well, and I appreciate it too, because I think sometimes we forget that, all students who are in secondary ensembles came through general music. Right. Mm-hmm. And we can so much build on what they do in those classes in what we do in our secondary ensemble. So I was seeing connections left and right, even though he was speaking as an elementary teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and just so many, I guess, just reiterating over and over again the importance for so many reasons to give students voice, to really listen to what they are saying and to give them choices, if not other, things to empower them. But those two are just kind of really great places to start if you're kind of at the beginning thinking like, how do I help kids feel like they're belonging or a sense of belonging? How do make sure I have an inclusive community? How do I, make sure it's a student-centered place? Like ask them things and give them choices and they will rise to the occasion, give them some time and they will rise to the occasion.
Yeah. Well, I think that everything he talked about was just awesome. So I'm excited for everyone else to listen to it as well. So before we get to today's interview, we want to remind you that you can support Pass the Baton and get awesome perks.
Join the coffee club for as little as $2 a month and unlock discounts, free resources, planning parties, and more. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more.
All right, welcome back and thanks for joining us. Theresa, I'm excited today. I get to introduce our guest. Thanks for being with us, Matthew Stensrud.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matthew, I was talking to Theresa earlier. I went to Peoria, Illinois for our Illinois Music Education Conference. And that's where I got to see you. It's just exciting to be able to talk to you because I really enjoyed your session. Or I think I saw a couple of your sessions. And so if people haven't seen you in a session, they need to, because it was really wonderful. And I still think about some of the things that you talked about almost a year ago.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. That was my first time in Peoria, and it was really exciting to be there to share with the Illinois music teachers for that weekend.
Yeah. Every time we come down, from the north, we come up from a Chicago area. We always I have a friend who always says, you always doubt your life choices as you drive down because there's always like snow coming from this side and wind and it's cold. But then you get there and you see a lot of music educators and you get to meet a lot of new music educators and it's always, always worth it. But the time of year is not the best.
I was impressed because it wasn't snowy at all. And actually, I was just in Canada to work with some teachers in Saskatoon, and they said last year there was a foot of snow. But when I was there was no snow. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm good luck or bad luck.
Well, you do live in DC, which is that snow hole, right? I feel like
I never see snow. That is accurate.
Yes. Well, before we get too far into our fun conversation, can you introduce yourself? Tell us all the good stuff. What's your background? What are you up to these days in the world of music education?
Sure, Theresa. Well, thank you. And thank you to both of you for having me. My name is Matthew Stensrud. I've been teaching elementary music for 15 years now, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I started right out of college and got my degree at Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, which was when I first fell in love with teaching music. My professor was Dr. Renee Boyer, who I actually just saw at the AOSA Orff Schulwerk conference in Des Moines 2 days ago. And I remember I went to an MEA in Ohio and saw Doug Goodkin teach there. And I just fell in love with the way he interacted with music and with improvisation and with playfulness. And I ate all that up. So then I got my levels in Orff Schulwerk and started teaching in Northern Virginia. And now I teach movement for Orff levels courses. I'm certified in responsive classroom, so I have a lot of knowledge in how to combine kind of how you teach music with classroom management. And I also now serve on the national board of the American Orff Schulwerk Association. So I'm just kind of trying to keep that organization going for all the good things we do for teachers, and then keep and then hope to move the organization forward in what we're doing, both for our students and for teachers too. So now I live in Washington, D.C. and teach at a private school in the D.C. area. And that's been a lot of fun. It's PK through 4. So I miss the 5th graders because they're amazing musicians, but I miss them less when they start to get older and puberty hits, as you know.
Yeah.
So in that way, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. I think something else that I've kind of recently pulled off the shelf too is your responsive classroom for, what is it, art, music, PE, and other specials. I know you
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. It's a great book. People need to take a look at it, because it's what I like about it is I read bits of it. So I'll read a chapter and then contemplate like, okay, and you give examples of music examples, but then like, okay, how do I make it mine? And I kind of chew on it for a while. And then before I know it, I'm like, oh, look at me, and then I'm ready
doing
for
it.
yeah. And then I'm ready for another chapter and I'll pull that out. And so
I think that's a great way to look at the book, because just like when we're teaching music, there's so much to digest. Doing it in smaller pieces kind of helps you then say, okay, this is what I'm going to do Monday because I just read this little bit. And I do think it's a really easy read too. So you can kind of pick it up whenever, if you have a half an hour during planning time, and read a few pages and then try something new. But that was a really special thing to be part of. I wrote an article about how responsive classroom connects with the music room. This was maybe like 2014, about 10 years ago now. And then the responsive classroom people reached out to me and said, well, actually, we were thinking about making a book, and we don't know many people that are specialized in teaching music. So I jumped at the chance to kind of help them out. So that was a really great opportunity. And it's a good resource.
Yeah, it is. Well, and I know today we wanted to, what I saw in Peoria was a great session. And maybe another thing that's you're passionate about talking about is like the sense of belonging and the sense of inclusivity. And I thought maybe we could start with just why is that important in a music classroom? I mean, we both know it is, but just to talk, kind of be explicit of like, why is that important?
Absolutely. The first thing I think of is the fact that making music is a risk for students to take, especially when we ask them to sing, when we ask them to improvise, when we ask them to work in small groups and move. Those are all ways that kids put themselves out there that they might not always do each and every day. And for kids to feel safe taking risks, they need to feel a sense of belonging, and they need to feel comfortable in your space. And that's the first thing I jump to why we created an inclusive space, because it actually helps them be better musicians and better participants in the space. Another reason, of course, is just the fact that we want each student to feel like they're valued for who they are. And when we offer windows and mirrors, or places for kids to both see themselves and learn about other people, we're making sure that each student feels valued. Another possibility for why students should feel valued is kind of that aspect of when we ask students questions, we want to take in their responses. And sometimes we ask questions when we're looking for right answers, but oftentimes in the Orff Schulwerk approach, we take everyone's ideas and we say, let's try it out. And then the students can kind of realize which ones are their favorites, or which ones maybe the teacher knew wasn't going to work out as great. But when we take those ideas and we say yes and instead of no, we show the students that their ideas are valued. So those are 3 things that come to mind right away that I jumped at, which was always saying yes and when students offer ideas, making sure we offer windows and mirrors for students to kind of see themselves, and that students take risks when they feel more comfortable in the space.
Yeah.
I love that, because in music, there shouldn't always be a right answer. We should be able to be free to interpret and to try things. And I think sometimes, so I mostly teach secondary, although now I'm working with college students, but in secondary, we feel like there's the right way to do it. There's the right way to play this piece, and there's the right way to phrase this, and there's the right way, but there's not. And if we can let students just try something, we might be pleasantly surprised.
Definitely. And that's a kind of a hard thing when you hit on the secondary thing. We're taught in college, and we're taught in our private piano lessons, like I was a pianist, that here's how you play it, and this is the fingering, and this is the technique. Yep. So it's really drilled into us, that kind of sense of perfectionism, and the sense of that this is the right way to do it, just like you said, Theresa. And it can, in the elementary music space, we kind of try to unlearn that a bit and encourage our students to say, yeah, let's go for it. And let them kind of be the creators, which is also why I'm wearing a shirt that says create at the very top too.
Love it.
Love that. Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think it doesn't have to end at elementary. We can keep those thoughts going, right? We can let them experiment.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think it's also just like remembering the student or the learner experience, right? That it's so important to think about how it feels yourself to be a learner. And so that, of course, it's, we're in a space where we're not teaching robots. We're teaching humans, we're teaching people. And right, they're going to have all kinds of feelings and definitely need to feel safe in the environment where they're going to learn and grow. So,
yeah.
So that takes a lot of intentionality from the teacher. And it's not something that's going to happen on day one either, but by having consistent procedures and by always kind of being open to what students are offering you, and by really providing inclusive materials and a safe, playful space, that's really how students are going to get to trust you, which can be tricky, especially when you're responding to misbehavior, because you still have to have students trust you when you're going through that. But when you do, the dividends absolutely pay off.
So, pass the baton, our whole thing is this idea of empowerment, right? And student ownership. So just in case somebody out there isn't making the connection already, help us out. How does this belonging contribute to having that sense of ownership for students?
Yeah, we love to pass the baton to them. So one of the ways I can think of just now, based on what you shared about student empowerment, is that let's say a student's misbehaving and you're presented with some challenging behavior. And I go to this because we know that all teachers face this, and it's one of the hardest things that we try to deal with. And it's not something that's naturally part of what we learn about in school, I think. And one way we can tackle that head on is kind of with this kind of student conference idea that I first learned about through Responsive Classroom, which is, rather than me reprimanding the student and giving them a consequence, I actually ask the student kind of what's going on and what might be causing the misbehavior. And in that way, the student's already feeling trustworthy, because they're like, oh, well, why is my teacher actually cares about why this situation might be happening, instead of just stop it and here's a consequence. And then you learn a little bit about what might be happening. And then you offer to the student, okay, I totally understand that you're calling out because you were in a bad mood when you came in from recess, but that's kind of affecting the whole classroom and some of our friends' learning, and you're not able to learn either. So what are some things that we could do every time you come in from recess and you're in a bad mood, so we could make this a better place for all of us? And then the student is then empowered to come up with some ideas. And they might say, if I feel that way, Mr. S, I'm going to go in and I'm going to sit in the beanbag and I'm going to give you a thumbs up, because it means that I need some time and I know that I'm not in control of my body. Or it might be another reason. They might say, I'm going to come up to you and tell you right away. Or it means I'm going to do something else. So you're trying to suggest to the student that instead of the teacher coming down from above with a consequence, the student is coming down and lifting up themselves and saying, here's what I can do to solve the problem. And that's absolutely passing the baton, because it's empowering them to make their own choices, but also kind of start to critically think about like what they might be facing themselves socio-emotionally. which they don't always get in their classroom spaces, but they should absolutely be empowered to do. So that's one example I could think of.
Yeah, I think too often we just stop that. We just tell them, tell them what to do, or you did this wrong, therefore you must sit out, or you must this, or whatever the case is. But that's such a that's a powerful way to do it, because the student then has to reflect on what they just did, and it's not just a passive exchange between the two of you.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, it takes time from the teacher, and it takes intentionality, and it takes, sometimes a few deep breaths so you don't lose your cool. But I've noticed that when I do that, the students feel much safer with me, and they want to then do better because they're realizing that it's a positive relationship that we're building. And I've definitely seen students over the course of like 2 to 3 years where we've had those student conferences, and now they've really matured into like a fourth grader that is like an amazing student behaviorally, because they just have started to kind of understand where they're coming from when they come into the space. They still might have bad days, but they're really proactive about letting me know. And it's because you've built up that sense of belonging over many years. Which is a good reminder to first year teachers. It doesn't always happen on the first day, and it takes time, but it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
No, that's
I think, and sometimes the most rewarding, when you work with somebody and you take that time to work through, possibly over a course of a couple of years, and then you see them really shine and know how to handle the situation. It really can be nice. I have a couple kids in my head where I'm like, gosh, we've come so far,
It's
and it's
such
really
a good
rewarding.
feeling. You're right, Kathryn. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then another thing I know you talked about in your presentation was and you just said earlier, is like you're very intentional in how you construct your lessons, and you have your environment to kind of help kids be. I think one of the things I think I read, I remember in your blurb or title, was like student-led community of music makers, right? So like, could you talk a little bit more about like how do you kind of pass that baton or empower them with that student-led instruction to like, get them creating music and getting them creating music, I guess. I'll end there.
No, totally. I will head to movement as a place, because I
Okay.
think that creative movement can be one of the more challenging ones for us music teachers, mostly because it's not something we learned when we were growing up. We're great musicians, and then we come into a space where, like, gosh, okay, we need to teach folk dancing and creative movement too. And we want to be really as improvisatory about it as we are with our music making. So one idea that comes to mind, which is we're actually preparing for a concert right now in second grade. And literally today, we took this kind of idea of snowflakes, which is in our story, and we went to our word wall of locomotor and non-locomotor words. And the students started calling out words that made them think of snowflakes. And then we put them on the board, and then they started to put them in different orders. And we tried out different orders of trying them. We tried them for 8 beats, and then we tried them for 4 beats, and then we switched them around. And the students led that entire thing. And of course, the teacher facilitates kind of the moving of it and what do we think about this or that. But generally, the students are offering all the ideas. They're recommending any switches. And over the course of a couple of weeks, you're going to start to see a kind of a really neat movement piece come together. Because the students have then moved into pairs where we've circled the words that we're going to do with our partner, and we've underlined the words we're going to keep by ourselves. And then ideally, they'll keep a few words that are class words, and then there'll be a couple that they choose just for them and their partner. So at that point, then you're really empowering these pairs to work on their own as well. And then throughout that process, the teacher just gives little tips or possibilities throughout. So when students are working in pairs, I might go around and ask, oh, this pair, I noticed that you're twirling. What if you twirled at a different speed? Or what if you twirled suddenly or in a more sustained fashion? Or what if you found another connection point? I notice you're twirling with your hands connected, but it could be interesting if you let go and then come back to back, and start to give them different possibilities. So that's one way I can think where students are both empowered to kind of take this idea of snowflakes and all of a sudden have these movement pieces, as opposed to a teacher saying, okay, here are the 3 words I came up for snowflakes: twirl and fall and melt. And now let's try them. And then we're going to do that for our sharing. It's much more student empowered. It takes a lot more time. But at the end of the product, the students are so excited about these individual pieces that they've made. And it really empowers them. And that's absolutely another way to pass the baton. Not unlike when you ask them to improvise on the xylophone or on hand drums, but it can feel trickier for teachers to try it in movement because it's sometimes a little more unknown to us. But I wanted to give that idea as, okay, we have a word wall. We can make a list of non-locomotor and locomotor words as teachers, and we can just ask students to choose their favorites and start to let them guide how they can come together.
Yeah.
Just thinking about how the connection's going to be so much stronger when the student's making it themselves. Like, and I'm visualizing the national standards in my head as well, because they're going through every bit of that process. They're having to think through, okay, what does a snowflake do? Right. And then they have to, I'm just seeing there's so much of a strong connection. Whereas, like you said, if you just went, okay, you're going to twirl for 8 beats and then you're going to melt for 4 and then you're going to do this and let's go on with it. There's no thinking happening from the student.
Yeah.
It's simply just following directions.
Right. So it's really exciting to kind of give them all of those tools. And it can feel a little like, oh gosh, I don't know what they're going to come up with, which is why it's great to have some like guiding questions. And if this is something you're new at, you can write 4 or 5 kind of guiding questions that you have ready at your toolbox. If you see a class if you see a pair that's really going crazy, you can say, what if you change the speed and you try to slow down? And that's just a way of saying, oh, you're going too crazy, don't do that. But instead, you can use movement word. Why don't you change the speed? And it sounds so much more positive.
Yeah.
And
And go ahead.
Sorry. that was 2nd grade, right? Was that what you said?
Yeah. So it'll be exciting to see how it comes together in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I feel like I can be having a general music classroom myself. I can just feel the excitement. I can like see your kids running in the class, not running, but coming into the classroom excited because, like they will remember their choices. You're not going to have to manage a lot of that. They're going to remember that they chose these 2, the classes, these 2, like they're going to remember those things because they got a chance to be a part of that decision making. So that's exciting,
Yeah. And you're right when you say that, Kathryn, because it's actually a little easier for the teacher. And when you get through the process, because I don't have to remember all the choreographies, they have ownership over the choreographies.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah. Again, sorry, the secondary person in me is just going, wow. Just thinking about all of this happening in 2nd grade. I love it.
Yeah, and lots of critical thinking skills that are already exploring.
And I think what sometimes when we talk to teachers about, empowering kids and constructing lessons for that, people think you've got to throw out the old and like just do this whole new thing. And it's like, no, like you take that teacher-led, here's the 3 movements we're going to do, and you just kind of shift and open that up a little bit for the kids, for the student experience. So it's just it's taking a lot of lessons and things we know and we do, and just maybe flipping them a little bit, or in the Orff world, not really even flipping it much because the Orff world kind of lends itself to that.
It definitely does. And it can be easy to fit these movements into an elemental form. It can be easy to put them into a rondo if you have a snowflake song. So it can fit very naturally into things that you're probably already doing. But it is, I think, kind of how you put it, a little bit of just the shift in the mindset of, instead of it being all teacher-led, you're really trying to build it from the ground up by letting the students bubble up ideas throughout the process.
Yeah. So is there another example maybe, or grade level or something you could share with us about what that looks like?
I wonder if we want to stick in movement or we want to go elsewhere. I think something else, because I do love to move, as everyone might know. And if you don't, you can absolutely learn more about me because I do love to dance. And I wasn't a dancer when I grew up. I was a pianist, but through working with students and through my Orff training, I realized how much I loved to dance. But to answer your question, because that's a side note, at the beginning of the year, I read the book Intersection Allies to my students, which is a beautiful, it's perfect for fourth or fifth grade. It's a perfect book to introduce students to intersectionality, which they learn at the beginning of fourth grade in their classroom. So they actually read the book in the classroom, and then they read it with me as well, which is nice because it takes a little bit of the pressure off of making sure I read every page. They've read every page. I can introduce the book and they already know it and they make those connections. And there's a little speech piece you can put from it. And then from that speech piece about intersectionality, I've put together a rap. And the rap is mostly empty blank spaces, except I've filled it in with stuff about me. So I'll say, my name is Mr. S and I'm here to say, and then there's a whole blank line, and I could say anything else about me that I want to share. And that's a way to empower students because they have this template for a rap, and then they're encouraged to think about an aspect of themselves that they want to write about. And over the course of a few days where we write phrases on the back, we practice speaking them with a steady beat on the drums to start to see how they feel. The students then have a 16-bar rap that they then get to share out with the class, which is really empowering. And I'm always impressed with how cool the raps are. And when you really practice the steady beat phrasing from the beginning of the process, when you're just having them write little phrases and making sure they fit with the beat when you play it, they're really musical too. And that's super cool to see. And what's neat about intersectionality is they can really write about any part of themselves. So some students might write about something that's kind of external, like their favorite sport. And some students write about something really internal and, and intentional about themselves that actually no one else in the class might have known about, which is also really special to see. And I've also seen students kind of write about family members that they want to lift up. I've seen students write about an endangered animal that they think is really special and they want to take care of. I've seen students write about the color of their skin or the country that their family comes from. And it's really neat to see them be so proud of who they are when they write these raps. And that's really what this idea is about through the story. So that's another way to empower them. And it just takes from the teacher side a little intentionality about how you introduce the story. And I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. So I actually verbalize that in my rap. And I kind of present that vulnerability, which can be the first time I did it, I was sweating bullets because I was like, gosh, this is a big part of myself to share with the kids that I don't know how it's going to be received. But I think by being vulnerable, they were really excited to then take a risk too, because they saw, oh gosh, Mr. S, was comfortable sharing about himself. I can do it too. And, but I don't pressure students to share anything deep. If they want to write about their love of soccer, they can. And it's just giving them that space to do so, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And how much do you learn about your kids, when everybody gets to learn about each other, that's a really talking about, inclusive community and just belonging. Like we really find out more about each other and what makes each other passionate about certain things. And I just think that can only help you just with relationships further on in your classroom because truly know more about each other. So
it definitely sets a really positive tone, I think, for the year in fourth grade. And I absolutely learned things that I had no idea that kid was interested in or a part of themselves I did not expect them to share about. And that is super cool.
Yeah.
Someone shared about the love of piano and I taught them for 5 years and I had no idea they played the piano. How's that?
Yeah.
What? So stuff like that is really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's such a special thing because students are getting to share a part of themselves. And I feel like, we're talking about belonging. Like that's the best way to do it. Like every person, no matter what your thing is that you want to share, it's welcome here in this space. Yeah. And I think I hear from, general music colleagues, oh, but I have so many students. I can't possibly learn about all of them, but you're sharing a really kind of easy way to do it. give them that opportunity to share.
Absolutely. That's it. It is an easy way to learn things about them. And you could take something like this 16-bar rap and you could put it down to first grade, because you could just have kids, you have a short little So Me song where they fill in the blanks of something. Like, what did you have for breakfast? Or what did, or something else about themselves, their favorite color, or their favorite sport, or it could be a million other things. And then you're passing around this So Me pattern around the room. You're letting students improvise because they get to fill it in themselves, and you're learning something else about them. And I think the more that we do that, you're both empowering students and you're getting at what you're saying, Theresa, which is we can learn about our students. And it's not as hard as we think, even if we teach hundreds and hundreds of kids.
Yeah. I'm even thinking, like, I could see that working in a variation in a secondary choral classroom, right? Like, there's no reason that has to stop at fourth grade. You could
definitely not
put the twist on it to meet your students where they are, but that could easily happen at other grade levels.
It'd be cool to see what stuff they could create when they're in high school. I mean, that would be super impressive.
Absolutely.
I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think something I keep hearing from you in the lessons or the activities that you've shared is just that kids are getting many, many, many opportunities to voice their own thoughts, and their voice is heard and received, but also, like, they have a lot of choice in what they're going to do, whether it's how they're going to move, what they're going to share about themselves, with their rap. And so I feel like that over and over and I heard that in your session, like, there's just a lot of chance for kids to have a voice in their learning and a choice in their learning.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really nice, again, if you think about the learner experience, that's the place that I'd like to be, where I'm heard and I get to be an active member of the lesson. So
yeah, it's essential to creating musicians that want to compose and improvise, and this is kind of how we're getting at it when they're choosing to share different things about themselves, or when they're making choices about their movement words. And what I would encourage the teachers is to start small, is to try the things like having them to fill in something that they ate for breakfast, to start with a small little pattern if they've never kind of created before. And it's a small risk you can take as a teacher, because just like we're encouraging our students to take risks, we should also take those risks. And I think when we show that vulnerability to our students by doing so, just today, I made I made like a silly, like, musical mistake when I was trying to teach something, and the students eat that up because they see that it's okay and it's not a big deal, And one of them said, "Oh, Mr. S, you said the wrong word. That was funny." And then I said, "Gosh, it can't be. That's crazy. That was fun, and let's move on." And that way, when they kind of put themselves out there, when they say something and they say it's something they didn't mean to say, they'll kind of feel like, "Oh, it's okay. I saw that happen earlier." That's another thing that comes to mind when you're trying this out.
Yeah, I feel like, I said that to my kids today too. I said, "Is it okay? We're going to try this. Is it okay to make a mistake?" And some of them were like, "What?" Well, didn't know what the answer was. I'm like, "Friends, you just heard me make like 5 mistakes. Mistakes are good. We're learning. We're doing, yes, it's okay to make mistakes." But yeah, to remind them, because maybe in different environments, it may not always be that. Hopefully it is for them. But like, yeah, it's okay to make mistakes. We're all here to learn. And yeah.
Look, I live in Washington, D.C., and it's a very perfectionism culture. So the more we can remind students they don't have to be perfect, because I think when you're taking like standardized tests, it feels like you have to be perfect. So the more we can encourage that, the better.
Yeah,
sure. You kind of just alluded to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. So when we wrote Pass the Baton initially, we included after every chapter this section called Things You Can Try Tomorrow, because we found that giving somebody something small and actionable was helpful, because you come away from a book or a podcast or a conference presentation with all these ideas, and sometimes it's hard to know what's like my first step, right? So what would you suggest somebody try tomorrow? What's their first step?
I think 2 things come to mind. One is to try a small movement activity, especially if movement is new to you, because I know so many teachers, including those who've taken their Orff training and Orff levels, that say, I never teach creative movement. I barely get to doing a play party or a folk dance. So one thing you can try tomorrow would be to try a little movement thing. And it could be very similar to the snowflakes idea. So you have a couple of words that you put on the board. Let's say it's jump and twirl and bend and walk, all very possible words. And you simply ask the students to try each one. And they try it in their place first, and then they try it in the space. And then you let them choose which one they want to do first. And then you let them try all four in their own order, and then they connect with a partner, and they have to demonstrate them, and their partner has to guess which one they're doing. And that is so easy. We can absolutely do that, and it would be a lot of fun. So a little movement word idea is something you can absolutely do tomorrow. The other thing to do tomorrow would be to find a tiny way for students to create something. So that could be the idea of having them sing on So and Me something about themselves. And one way I do it is with a little puppet. So I just got this new puppet at the AOSA conference of this little purple dragon, and it's so cute. And the students have named them Baby. So we hold Baby and we say hello to them, but you have to sing when you when you talk to our puppets, because that's the only way they hear. They can only hear you if you're singing. Otherwise they can't. So in kindergarten, we might hold Baby and we might say, "Hello, Baby. It is great to meet you. I hope you have a great day." And then pass it to my friend. And then my next friend gets to sing about Baby, but they get to say whatever they want. And right then and there, the students are vocally improvising. And some of them will sing the exact same thing that you do, but almost always they'll change just a little bit. Partially because they can't quite remember it, partially because they might have a different verbiage for how they might say something like that. And just by doing that, they're vocally improvising, which is so exciting. And that's a tiny thing you can do that would both enrapt your kindergartners because they love something like that. And it's a simple way for them to create tomorrow. So I hope you try both those things out.
Yes, I love that.
I tell you, the power of puppets, they really, if you haven't
So
tried them in
true.
the classroom, it's just, and I've done things like that too, where I'll do singing games and just encourage kids to join us, but they don't have to sing by themselves, but you put a puppet in front of them and then have them make the puppet sing. And here comes this beautiful little voice. So there's really, puppets do a lot of magic.
They really do. It's really empowered my kids to sing individually, which I've never forced. If they don't feel comfortable doing it, it's absolutely fine. But more so than anything else, if they have a puppet in their hands, the whole class wants to go around and sing to the puppet.
Oh, yeah. We'll sit there and wait for my turn. Yep.
They're so excited to hold that puppet, Kathryn.
And then
do
your older ones want to have the puppet come back out? Because mine are still about can Sebastian come out and talk to us or sing to us? Or so
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
even my fourth graders, they all met the puppet. It was a big deal. And we're constantly having fun with those puppets too, which is a good reminder that our fourth and fifth graders, they're still kids.
Yep. They're still little.
Even if you're in secondary, Theresa, those 10th graders are still kids.
Yep.
They kind of love the joy of the childlike stuff that we can bring back. And sometimes we grow them up too fast. But if you ask those sixth graders, what is your favorite music game from first grade? We could try it again. They're like, oh, we could do it again. I'd love to play that game again. So I think that's an important reminder as well.
That is so important. And I find myself reminding, the college students of that. We do music because it's fun, remember? We do. We need to have fun when we do all of this. So that's a very good reminder.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, this has been wonderful. Thanks again for coming and speaking with us today. How do people connect with you and find out more about you?
It was so nice to chat with you both. This was really great for me. And it gave even me some kind of good reminders about why I love teaching, which I think sometimes, especially in the winter time, as it's getting cooler now, I kind of lose sight of that on occasion, or as I'm getting ready for my concert programming, I get a little stressed about that. So these are good intentionalities for myself too. Well, the way you can stay in touch with me is I have a website, matthewstensrud.com or mrsorff.com. Both of those head to the same place. Mr. spelled out Misters, Orff, ORFF.com. I also have a Patreon page, which is if you liked that intersection allies idea that I was talking about, or the snowflake movement ideas, you can find lessons like that and tons of other ones on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/mrsorff. And that's a great way to stay in touch with me. And I have Zooms with various teachers, and I post lessons and videos there. Plus, you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Mr. S. Orff. And I absolutely love connecting with teachers, as both of you know. It's one of the ways I've grown is by the mentors that I had that helped turn me into the teacher that I am today. So I think giving back, just like the two of you are through this podcast, by passing the baton to other teachers is so important, and really something special about the music education community is that we really want to empower and lift up future teachers. And that's something that I love to do as well.
I'll make sure I put all of those links in the show notes too, so that if people were
Thanks, Theresa. I said a lot of things, didn't I?
No, not
Those
that.
are all good things. People should know.
Yes. Sometimes we're driving and we can't write them down, but I'll put all the links there so people can connect with you. So thank you so much. This was awesome. It's, again, like, as a secondary instrumental person, it's just exciting to me to always hear what happens in elementary and to make the connections of it doesn't have to stop after 4th and 5th grade. We can keep all these things going, and we should. Mm-hmm. So I love it.
Definitely. It was great to chat with you both. Thank you again for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.